Welcome to Everyday Economics, a podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, president of the nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics and podcasts such as this one, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording this episode on Wednesday, April 12th. And joining me as always, Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O, who knows more about stuff in the economy than you? Nobody I know.
Oh, man, you're too kind, Chris. I learned from so many people, man. And I keep learning every day.
I'll tell you. So, one of the things that we like to do on Everyday Economics every so often, and perhaps we should do it more, is to just kind of get into the weeds, but into the weeds for the purpose of simplifying things. There's a lot going on in the economy. Every one of us participates in the economy. I love it when you talk about, what is an economy, and they're not just units, it's people.
It's people making choices, faced with constraints, having to make decisions, right? And so that's what it's all about.
One of the core things that you have to concern yourself with, as you become as you're leaving adolescence and joining adulthood, and then throughout adulthood, is your credit score, which is essentially it's your ability to borrow. It defines your ability to borrow.
It's everything. I mean, access to credit, in my opinion, it's so important. It determines whether you're going to thrive in good times or survive tough economic times. Even billionaires use credit. They use different types of lending mechanisms, but they use it. Right? It's important to have that collateral. It's important to have that asset. It's important to have a good reputation. The banks will look at that. They care about that in order to determine whether they should lend to you or not.
Well, I'll tell you what. So we're going to talk about your credit score, what it means in terms of your ability to borrow. But let's start with this. Where does your credit score come from? How is a credit score determined? And what can we do? We'll just bridge into this. What can we do to positively influence our credit score?
Banks are trying to predict your likelihood, the likelihood that you'll be able to repay the debt. And so it's mostly based on whether if you've successfully repaid debt in the past, right? So, you lend a bit of money, and that's what we say to people, look, establish credit early. Even if you don't like to borrow, make sure you borrow a little bit and you repay it right away, right? Establish credit early, very early on. I got my 6-year-old his first debit card. It's not credit yet, but at least he has a debit card. He starts banking. One of the main reasons that people struggle, if you look, for example, at the Black homeownership rate, right? The Black homeownership rate is less than half. Black families, Black households own their own home. Black homeownership rate in this country is 30 points below white homeownership. And one of the things that we noticed when we looked at those numbers is that the share of people who were unbanked, who had no interactions, they weren't using the traditional banking system, was huge amongst Black households.
So when you say that, you mean that they're getting a check when they get a check, when they're getting paid, they're going to a check cashing service, or they're going to a bodega or somewhere that will cash a check for them for a small amount. Why aren't more Black Americans utilizing traditional banking system?
Banking deserts. This is banking deserts. No banks in their neighborhoods, right? Which is really sad. A history of discrimination. I mean, the banks didn't want to service Black families in the past. And then maybe even lack of access to broadband and internet for some really low-income families. And of course, fintech's trying to change that. Point is that you need to start early.
Let's talk about that. So Money Magazine came out with a story within the last 10 days, right? I think it came out on April 4th. And it's a pretty good story. Leslie Cook wrote this. It was updated by a colleague of hers by the name of Peter Greevy. And so, their list is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. If you want to raise your credit score, 1, pay your bills on time. 2, keep your credit utilization rate low, right? 3, leave old accounts open. Kind of interesting. I guess you have to have an account to leave that account open to move on to the next account. 4, take advantage of these score boosting programs. I want to talk more about that. I saw this, Experian has this product called Boost. It seems a little magic unicorn for me, but I'd want to get some insight on that. 5, only apply for the credit that you need. 6, be patient. Good luck pitching that to Americans. And 7, monitor your credit, which I agree with. Credit monitoring, for the most part, is not that big of a deal. It used to be a pain, but now it's pretty easy.
And some credit cards will give it to you for free, right?
So a lot of this is common sense, right? And a lot of this is not happening like instantaneously.
It's common sense to you, but to a lot of listeners, they haven't figured it out. And our job is to try to help them. I think it's very important to establish early, to get a credit card, start early, and to repay that credit card. It's really all about your utilization rate. Having, and by the way, this is why they said keep your old credit cards open. Because the idea is you want to have a massive balance of available credit. You want to have a ton of available credit. And to have a ton of available credit, you may need a few credit cards.
But you just have to keep using them or the credit card company itself will cut you off. So you have to.
Exactly. You have to keep using them occasionally. And by the way, there are benefits. A friend of mine calls credit cards a cheat code. There are benefits to every credit card, right? So some credit cards give you cash back. Other credit cards give you airline miles. In fact, I'm going on vacation next month and it's completely free of charge because of a wonderful credit card. You get airline miles. You're going to have hotels, right? And so you can kind of play around with them and kind of use them, to fit your needs, right? And then make sure you repay them because you want to make sure that you have a large available credit. You want to make sure that you're always paying on time because your payment history determines 35% of your credit score. Credit usage determines 30% of your credit score. Your length of credit history, like how long you've utilized credit for, which is why I said start early, will determine 15% of your credit score. Your credit mix, meaning, hey, I don't just have one account with $100,000 available credit on it. I have multiple accounts, right? That credit mix is part of the trust. And so the more banks trust you, the more they're willing to lend to you. And so I think that's what you got to understand about credit.
I'm with you on that. So just in the last minute or so, talk to me about these boosting programs and what are they really doing? I mean, is it an inquiry into your credit? So it's evaluated. Is it, I don't understand how you push a button and your score goes up.
Yeah. The number one thing that really, really makes a difference for the credit boosting programs is the fact that for so many Americans who pay rent, who don't own their home, who pay rent on a monthly basis. They pay bills. They pay, their phone bills. They pay their utilities bills. A lot of that is not recorded by the credit bureaus. And so it doesn't count.
It hadn't been.
And it needs to be because it's part of your ability to repay debts. And so the Experian Boost, as is one example, is one that will allow people to put in their rent payments, right? Get that verified. They put in their bank accounts and then Experian can look through their bank statements and see their rent payments are made on time and see their utilities payments. And it uses all these factors. It uses all of it and accounts for that in your credit score to give you that extra boost you might need. And so I think that's a great, great piece of technology. Again, it just shows that technology is making a huge difference to help people who traditionally didn't have access, who historically didn't have access. It's helping a lot of people gain access.
Always enjoy the opportunity to talk about the macro and the micro and certainly, economic literacy, financial literacy is an important part of what we're trying to do at Everyday Economics. Orphe, it's always a pleasure. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other quality podcasts at americastalking.com.